Hey, everybody, welcome in. It's Monday, October 23rd, 2023. You're listening to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's MLB betting podcast. Brendan Glasheen with Sean Zerillo and BJ Cunningham. Two critical games. We have a game 7 tonight that we'll get to momentarily. Rangers, Astros, Scherzer, Javier, your pitching matchup. That is the nightcap. It's on Fox. We'll get to that one. The first game we will discuss, Diamondbacks, Phillies. D-backs tried to extend this series to a game 7, which would be tomorrow. It's Merrill Kelly against Aaron Nola. That one starts on TBS just after 5 o'clock. We have a contest winner to give out. We've been asking folks to subscribe and leave a 5-star rating and a review. Congrats to Grado360, Grado 360. You win. Thanks for tuning into the podcast and leaving a 5-star rating and review. To claim your free Action Pro access for 1 year, email podcasts@actionnetwork.com to claim your prizes. We put that info in the description as well. So if you don't hear me saying it, it's there for you. We're here every weekday when there is baseball being played this week. More to come. If these series both end tonight, stay tuned. We'll have an update on when we'll do a World Series preview. The World Series starts on Friday, no matter what happens tonight. So more to come on a big breakdown of the World Series once we get a matchup. So that's the housekeeping. Again, we appreciate folks that are tuning in. If you're more new to baseball, not so much new, but you're more dialed in because it's the postseason. We hope you're enjoying it. So let's dive in. We've got NLCS Game 6 tonight, Arizona, Philadelphia. Aaron Nola, Zerillo, can close this out for the Phillies. How are we approaching, from a betting standpoint, how are we approaching this game tonight?
So I do see value on the Diamondbacks, but as we talked about before the series, I bet the Phillies minus 1.5 games. So I'm not going to go ahead and bet the Diamondbacks and directly contradict my Phillies position. I'm riding the Phillies essentially at a plus 120, plus 125 number today to close the series out. But if you don't have a bet on anything, if you want to fire a bet, you can bet on the Diamondbacks down to about plus 163. And here's why. I love being able to bet on playoff rematches because you get a lot of information about what the line should be based on the previous iteration of the matchup. It's best for playoff hockey because you get the same team, same goalies at the same venue, right? 4 or 3 times in a 7-game series. In baseball, you're not necessarily going to get the same pitching matchups or the same home venue with those pitching matchups. But generally speaking, games 2 and game 6 of a 7-game series, you are going to get the same starting pitchers in the same home venue. And we know exactly where that line closed for game 2. Philadelphia closed at minus 166 consensus. Arizona plus 140 consensus. If you shop around, you could have found better or worse numbers, but those were the consensus lines, minus 166 and plus 140. For game 6, Philadelphia opened closer or has been bet up closer to minus 180, and Arizona is closer to plus 166. So that Phillies line has inflated by about 1%, 2%. That Diamondbacks line has inflated by closer to 4%. So you can get a substantially better number on the Diamondbacks for this game than you were able to get for the last game. Yes, the Phillies blew them out 10-0. Merrill Kelly was pretty effective until he got through the lineup a third time, and ultimately they had to lift him. He allowed a 6th-inning home run to Kyle Schwarber, and that has been a theme throughout the series for Arizona. Their starting pitchers going a third time against Kyle Schwarber, against Bryce Harper, they're getting lit up. Their bullpen hasn't been ready to go, and then Lovullo ends up having to pull these guys late. So tonight, I would expect the bullpen to be ready to go by the third time they face Kyle Schwarber. I would lean to the under 15.5 outs on Merrill Kelly as a result. I know their starters gone deep in the series. They have to be aggressive with the bullpen tonight, and I don't think you can let him see Schwarber or Harper for a third time. So Kelly under 15.5 outs. One bet I like, as I said, the Diamondbacks on the money line, I do think are a value bet. Bryce Harper to walk again is a bet I've bet throughout this series. He had a couple of 3-ball counts or 3 3-ball counts against Zach Allen last game. He swung at a 3-0 pitch that was down the middle with nobody on base, was hoping he was going to take the walk there. He also had a pair of 3-2 pitches. One he hit a home run on, one he hit a single on for an RBI. So Diamondbacks continue to pitch around Harper, should have opportunities to walk tonight. And then on the other side, Aaron Nola under 1.5 walks. Nola has had 100 career plate appearances, including his last playoff start against the Diamondbacks. He's allowed 1 walk. He's allowed 1 walk in about 75 plate appearances this postseason. His command has been impeccable. His stuff looks great. So Noah under 1.5 walks. Thank you, Anthony DeMundo, for pointing me in that direction. And then lastly, the under 8. I was on the over 7.5 in game 2. Or game 2. I projected the total closer to 7.9. We have better under weather here than we had in game 2.
Yep.
So I made this total 7.3. Again, you're going to see the bullpens be used more aggressively. Any elimination game. So I like the under 8 tonight to -114. I said it was in the over 7.5 in the last game. I like the under 8 tonight. But I think the biggest note is the pricing adjustment on Arizona. You were betting them in this same pitching matchup at +140. Now you're getting +166. Maybe because it's an elimination game. Maybe because they got blown up the last time they were in this matchup. But Noah and Kelly was pretty competitive, especially early. It was really the bullpen for Arizona that blew it. So I think there's definitely value on the Diamondbacks tonight. I'm just not in a spot to bet it. I would prefer to bet the under 8 to -114. And then, as I said, Noah under 1.5 walks, Bryce Harper to walk, and Merrill Kelly under 15.5 outs. So those are my 3 prop plays.
If you haven't been able to tell, we have a lot of action on these 2 games tonight. So I know BJ's got thoughts too, but DeBundo made a good point. I saw this in the app last night. Sunset in Philadelphia is 6:10. This game starts just after 5 o'clock. So the shadows are going to play a part at Citizens Bank Park today. Going to be in the high 50s. Temperature will drop. And I think Zerillo's point was about, I'm assuming you mentioned weather. You're talking about the sun setting too. That could play a part in this, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. The timing of the game. I considered betting a first 5 under too for those shadows, a first 5 under 4.5 to about -120. That's something I'm going to continue to take a look at as well, because you just look at the scoring for the last time these 2 teams played. At this time, it was low scoring through the first 5 innings, and then it started to pick up. So maybe the shadows had something to do with that. Maybe just the quality of the bullpens versus the starting pitchers had something to do with that. And I also just think these teams have gotten a lot of looks at these respective bullpens, and they seem to be having very comfortable at bats against these relievers too. Not the super late inning guys like Sewald and Alvarado, but the middle inning guys like Saul Frank, and they're falling apart in these plate appearances. So I'm more inclined to bet the first 5 under, knowing these bullpens might blow it. But yeah, I think this is a decent spot for the under today. As you said, not just because of the weather, but also because of the shadows that they're going to be getting with the time of game. I mean, this game would have been 8 p.m. until Texas forced the game 7 last night. So now it's going to be 5 p.m. The weather's a little bit different than we expected, and sort of changes just the conditions of how it might play out.
All right, BJ, you can chime in now. I know you like Merrill Kelly's under outs, which I want your thoughts on this too. If that number does move to a 14.5, do you stay away? 15.5 right now at BetMGM, under juice to -160. Your thoughts for game 6 in Philly?
Well, it's exactly what Sean said. Is given Lovola what he did with Fott early when the series went back to Arizona, basically taking him out through 5 2/3, even though he was pitching very well because he didn't want to see the 3rd time through. I think he's learned his lesson, and he's not going to do that again, what he did with Kelly. Now, there is some, obviously, Kelly and Gallen have a little bit of a longer leash than a rookie does. But again, he's not going to do it given what happened this time around. The one thing I'll say about Kelly, he was pretty wild in that game against Philly. You could say he's effectively wild. He threw 89 pitches and 50 of them were out of the zone, trying to get the Phillies to chase, which I find interesting. And if you look through his season, he's a 3.5 walk per 9 rate pitcher. His last 5 starts before the regular season, he walked 2 or more batters in every single start. So I do like his under 15.5 outs, echoing everything that Sean said. I think the matchup's also not great for him, even though he did pitch pretty well in that game too.
8 of the 10 runs were scored in the 6th and 7th inning.
Exactly. And when we have these pitching outs, and what we're talking about is what has to go right for Merrill Kelly to get through essentially to the 6th inning. There's a lot that has to go right. Essentially,
they got to be up like 6-0.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you think about it, either they got to have a huge lead, or he's basically got to be perfect and not allow a ton of batters on base to via walks or hits if he's going to see the order essentially, 2 times through and not seeing a third. So 18, you have to think, okay, is 4 guys going to get on base against him against and with this Phillies lineup, the way that they're hitting the ball? I would say yes. So I do like under 15.5 outs. One thing that, and this is really juicy, but I might just bet it out of principle. Kelly over 1.5 walks is -190. It's a very, very juicy price. Like I said, he's walked 2 or more batters In his last 5 regular season starts, he did it both times. He walked 3 guys against the Phillies, 2 guys against the Dodgers, 50 pitches of his 89 out of the zone. Boy, if we're liking Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber and all these guys to walk, it's a very juicy price. And I wish I could get a 2.5 or a straight 2, but they'll never give that to me. But I think I'm at a principle. I have to bet over 1.5 walks for Merrill Kelly if he's going to continually try to get the Phillies to chase out of the zone repeatedly. So Kelly under 15.5 outs, Kelly over 1.5 walks at -190. This is going to be really dumb when I'm watching this game and he's just, pumping balls into the strike zone. But given what we've seen from him, he's trying to get the Phillies to swing out of the zone. So, and given how good they've been at being disciplined with that, I don't think it's going to happen. So those are my 2 bets for this game.
I think what factors into both of your handicaps too with Kelly is Kyle Schwarber. The fact that Schwarber's been their hottest hitter. I know, Zerillo, you've been on the Harper walk train here during this series, but the fact that Schwarber's at number 1 in the order and the third time through component, the fact that their hottest hitter is Schwarber and he leads off that lineup, that's got to be baked into Lavillo's thought process there, coming from the dugout. Because
you'd think, but in game 2, he let Kelly go through Schwarber, Turner, Harper, Bohm a third time.
Yeah.
And then brought in Mantiply to face Stott. And it's like, if you're going to bring in the lefty, why aren't you bringing him in for Schwarber and Harper, not Bryce and Stott?
Good point.
So the usage has been confusing to me. But again, like, he didn't have anybody ready for the start of the inning. Schwarber homered, and then the bullpen got up. So it never crossed his mind to start the inning with Kelly. If he doesn't, it's in my article today. If he makes the same mistake a third time, like, it's manager malpractice. You can't keep making the same mistake in the series. He did it last night. Gallen gave up a run in the 6th. How many times are you going to make the same mistake? So Kelly under 15.5 outs. Brendan, though, like, if it goes down to 15, that's the lowest I'm betting it. I'm not betting 14.5. It's 15.5. 15 at even money, -110. That's about as far as I'm going. I would bet a juice 15.5. I'd lay the juice. That hook is going to be key.
Kyle Schwarber at BetMGM over a half base, -130. And then let's see where that price is now on Harper to walk over a half a walk is -135. So that number's
and the correlated stuff that I've seen Anthony and Charlie firing is the stolen base props for guys like Schwarber and Harper. If they're getting walked, just higher likelihood, they could be on the back end of a double steal with somebody. Turner gets on in front of Harper, doubles, right? Then Harper walks, and then you get a double steal where Harper's getting the back end of it. So it's happened in the series, and it's big, juicy plus money. So there's a bit of correlation between the walks and the steals.
Turner is interesting too with that. He walked twice against Kelly in this last game, and he's obviously one of their biggest threats on the base. So him as well. Basically, the top 3 of their order are all live to get a stolen base.
And Arizona has to run at some point. They haven't run in the series. They've run on Craig Kimbrell. They haven't run on anybody else. I'm sad to see them being scared to run. It's what's gotten you this far. Lean into it. Like, you got to go at some point. So Arizona steal props tonight. It'd be wild if they go down in the series without running at all. Like, I feel like they have to run. They have to try to run tonight. So Nola's been great with the slide step. They've been afraid to run on it. I don't know. Maybe they were watching tape and trying to figure out when they can run on it, but they have to try at some point.
Do what you do. By the way, that's a good call out there by BJ. Trey Turner walked twice in game 2 against Kelly and over half a walk plus 230 at BetMGM for tonight's game.
He doesn't have a high walk rate throughout the season. I'll just mention that because I did look at it this morning. It's like 6%, where comparatively Schwarber and Harper are around the 15. I think Schwarber's at 17, Harper's at 15% or around that. So that's why it's that high, just to say. But again, Turner did homer against him in the first one. So Kelly was obviously a little scared and trying to pitch around him. So I think that's what kind of led to it. And that's really what, again, kind of leads to him maybe walking a few more guys.
Yep.
Okay, let's go to Texas and Houston. Game 7 tonight at Houston. It's still Minute Maid Park, right? They still call it Minute Maid Park?
Yep.
Okay. These ballparks keep changing.
Enron Field.
Thank you.
As a former accountant, that's a funny reference.
Astros on the money line, -125. Rangers plus 105. Pitching matchup, Javier Scherzer. Max Scherzer. I don't think you were on, Zerillo. I mean, I know you bet it, but you were on the podcast, and we were on Scherzer's under outs BJ dropped the Julian Edelman to Tom Brady. You're too old. He was messing me off to the side. So I'll let BJ go first on this one, because does Scherzer redeem himself? This is why you go get Max Scherzer at the trade deadline, for this kind of start against Houston on the road. I know you both bet, or Zerillo, I know you bet Houston overnight. You had a price target on Houston to win Game 7. Well, here we are, Game 7 tonight, the nightcap. BJ, you first, though. What do you got?
I don't understand why Scherzer's at 13.5 outs. He opened. I really don't get it. Is it just because it's Game 7, it's Max Scherzer, and they're just going to let him go as long as possible? Because I don't see that as the scenario that we're going in here. So Scherzer wasn't great in that start against the Astros. Obviously gave up 5 runs. But really, more than anything, the pitches that were in the zone got absolutely crushed. 9 of the 12 balls that were put into play, or 13 balls that were put into play, were graded as hard hits by StatCast. Only 36 of his 63 pitches were actually in the zone. So he was on what we thought, at least, it was on a 65 to 70 pitch count for that Game 3. Now, Game 7, you can say you throw everything out the window. Who cares? But again, it's a 40-year-old guy coming off of a shoulder injury. And I have a hard time seeing that he's actually going to see the order the third time through, unless he pitches incredibly well and he's just pitching great. I mean, do I need to go through and do the math again, Brendan, to let people know of what it could be? I mean, the realistic scenario here is if he's on a 65 to 70
do the same thing you did the last game. What has to go right for Max Scherzer to get over 13 and a half, 12 and a half outs, whatever the number?
I'll just say it really quickly again. So he averaged 16 pitches an inning this season. If he's on a 70 pitch count, that means that in realistic scenario is that he will go 4 1/3 innings if everything goes right. But again, he faced an Astros lineup that is a disciplined lineup that does have a very high walk rate against right-handed pitching. So if he's going to continually throw the ball outside the zone and try to get them to chase, and they're not going to swing at it, he's going to struggle, because if he has to throw a ball inside the zone, they're going to hit him just like they did in Game 3. So his under 12.5 outs opened at plus 105. It closed around minus 150. And now we're getting under 13.5 in the minus 120 range. Again, unless it's some sentimental reason and Bochy just leaves him out there because he's Max Scherzer and it's Game 7, I don't see a scenario why the Rangers wouldn't heavily use their bullpen. They only used 2 pitchers last night. So I think the bullpen is going to be very, very heavily used from the Rangers here. Once he gets into trouble, I don't think they're just going to leave him out there. And one more thing I'll mention that I mentioned the last time, he gets really flustered when guys get on base.
Yeah.
Like his xFIP goes from 3.5 to over 5 when guys get on base. So, and even in that game when he was giving up runs, I was just like, why are they leaving him out there? Why are they leaving him out there just to get through 4 innings? And it took a lot for him to just get to 12 outs. So again, a lot of things have to go right for Max Scherzer, and he somehow has to turn back the clock at 40 years old, coming off a shoulder injury, and pitch incredibly well to get over, not only get into the 5th inning, but get past 13.5 outs. So under 13.5 outs, minus 120. I also did under 4.5 Ks at minus 130 as well. I just really don't see a scenario if he's going to continually try to live outside the zone and Houston's not going to swing at it, how he's going to get deep into this game and how they're not going to yank him at the first sign of trouble.
Mm-hmm. And they used Sporbs. How do you say his last name? Evaldi's the guy who relieved Evaldi last night.
Spores, right?
Josh Spores.
Spores. Okay,
Yeah.
It's a funky one when you look at it too long and you overthink
And
it.
Leclerc as well was used.
The fact that the Rangers blew that one open was massive, because you wonder if they used Leclerc for another inning in a high leverage spot, but they didn't have to. Chapman didn't pitch last night. Zerillo, we talked about this a little bit before we went live. That Bochy seems doubtful, or he doesn't have full confidence in that middle part of his bullpen. So I'm curious. Look, it's the kitchen sink kind of game, right? You're trying to move on to the next round. Do they use starters? Does like Montgomery become available tonight? Something of the like. Where are you at here on just Scherzer in general and also just the side? I know you're on Houston.
Yeah, I can't stop thinking about, somebody posted the other day, it was the picture of Drake walking out with Kentucky basketball, and they said Max Scherzer coming to ruin another team's playoff chances. It's phenomenal. I had a different take on Scherzer's game 3 start than BJ to a degree. And he almost came out for that 5th inning. He was debating with Bruce Bochy in the dugout whether to come out for the 5th inning. Now, if they're down 5-2 in the 5th inning game 2, he's not coming out, or he's not coming back into the game for the 5th inning. But for the first 3 innings of game 3, Scherzer was averaging closer to 94 to 95 on his fastball. His fastball velocity on the year was about 93.7. He was at 94.1 on average in that start. But most of that weight was towards the 1st through 3rd innings. Come the 4th and 5th inning, he wore down. The fastball velocity dropped to 93, 94, closer to 93, where it was sitting closer to 94 to 96 for the first 3 innings. His slider was also a mess. Couldn't throw it for strikes. It was getting hit when he did put it in the zone. Just didn't have command. My takeaway was it was more to do with the rust than it was to do with Scherzer's health. I actually thought the stuff looked back to where it was when he's at full health, but only for about the first 3 innings. And I thought his command was a mess. So to me, I think we're going to get a better version of Max Scherzer tonight. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't like the Astros in this matchup, because I've continued to upgrade Christian Javier as well, both during the playoffs and near the end of the regular season. Javier looks like he's back to his full form from last year too. But just to stick with Scherzer for a second, 35% strikeout or called strike plus whiff rate in that start. So he was getting swings and misses. Yes, the Astros were chasing a little bit, but again, I think it really came down to his slider command. He wasn't able to hit the low inside corner to lefties, the low and outside corner to righties with that slider. And if he can't hit that pitch, that's his signature pitch. If he's not going to be able to throw that for strikes, it kind of makes his whole game fall apart. So I am very cautious about betting Max Scherzer unders here, because if he's pitching well, if he's pitching like he's supposed to, if I'm Bruce Bochy, I trust that more than I trust my middle relievers. I'm trying to take Scherzer all the way until the back end of my bullpen in a close game. And even if he gives up a solo shot and we fall behind by a run, I think that's a better possibility than, giving it to your bullpen and the same thing happening. So I'm a little bit skeptical about betting the Scherzer unders today. I was all over them in game 3. I think he looked okay. And I think you're going to get a better version of Max Scherzer today. And I don't really want to be a part of that situation where him and Bochy are arguing in the dugout about whether he should come back out for the 5th inning today. So it's a pass for me concerning those props. I'd probably lean under, whereas I bet, I'd probably lean over, I should say, whereas I bet the unders for game 3. But then on the other side of the matchup, I bet Javier over 12.5 outs for game 3. I'd probably lean under today for a game 7 where Houston's bullpen, which is the better bullpen, is fully rested and ready to go. And those spots that Baker let him pitch out of in past games, I don't necessarily think he's going to let Javier try to squeeze out of today. So Javier under, that's where I'd lean with my bet. Again, not firing on it. The one player prop I did bet, Yordan to walk. And they intentionally walked him last night with a runner on first and 2 out. They moved a runner into scoring position in the 3rd inning, a 1-1 game in the 3rd inning. They moved a runner from first to second to walk Yordan to face Jose Abreu. That told me all I needed to know. Texas wants no part of Yordan. There's a good chance they intentionally walk him again tonight in a similar spot. So Yordan to walk was plus money. I'd take that up to minus 120.
How much of that had to do with Evaldi's lack of success against him? You follow me? Like, do you think that's a staff consensus is your point?
Scherzer has had trouble with Yordan as well. Yordan in the regular season, 4 for 7, a home run, 3 walks, no strikeouts. So he sees the ball well against Scherzer. I believe he got an RBI single off of him in game 3. It's Max Scherzer's not the kind of guy you're going to tell to intentionally walk somebody. So maybe you take away one plate appearance where that's a possibility, but they've also just been pitching around him. They until they get in situations where they have to pitch to him, 2 runners on base, 3 runners on base, 2 out, they don't really seem to actually throw pitches in the zone. He's like Bryce Harper. Yordan is swinging at a lot of pitches outside of the zone because he wants to do damage, with what he's being offered. So I think Yordan to walk is a decent spot. I wouldn't really bet the walk and the total bases. I'd bet one or the other, and I'd expect it to be pitch around tonight. So that's where I'm going with my one player prop for this matchup. Concerning the side of the total, you could take Houston to about minus 120, minus 123. And then I also like the under 9 to even money, under 9.5 to minus 120. Should get fairly aggressive bullpen usage tonight from both teams. It's more so just these guys aren't going to pitch through trouble. They get runners on, they're probably going to come out of the game, and you're not going to have guys pitching through situational spots that they normally would, which just leads to more runners being stranded in scoring positions. So the under 9 to even money, or minus 120, closed at 9, about minus 110, or it closed at 9 even money, I should say, for game 3. So it's about in the range where it was. And the game, we talked about rematches before, right? Game 3. So game 3 was the same pitching matchup as game 7. Different home field. So you do have to swap that line. But Texas closes minus 125 favorites. Houston plus 108. The line for game 7 opened the inverse. Houston minus 125. Texas plus 108. And considering the home field adjustment, about 7 or 8%, that is where you'd expect it to open. So I said before, the Phillies game, right? The same matchup. The line is about 20 cents higher for Arizona than it was the last game. This line for game 7 between Houston and Texas, it is exactly what you'd expect, just taking the same pitching matchup and switching it to home park. So tough to find value on this game unless you either downgraded Scherzer or upgraded Javier relative to game 3. I've upgraded Javier just to touch it as I've continued to do. I actually didn't downgrade Scherzer, but Javier continues to move up for me.
Interesting. Yeah, Leclerc, 16 pitches last night. Chapman didn't pitch. What get the juices flowing for a game 7 for me personally is when they let the starting pitchers, like, does Montgomery pitch tonight? Like how do you go from Scherzer to Chapman and Leclerc? Like, do they go off the cuff? Do they think outside the box? Do you guys have a thought on that? I mean, we'll have to watch and find out, but I'm curious. Do they go to a Montgomery, for instance?
Well, yeah, they used Heaney last night in the 9th inning. So Dane Dunning would be their quote-unquote long man tonight. He wasn't great in his other appearance in the series. I'm kind of down on Dane Dunning in general. He doesn't have much stuff. He's more of a command guy, and he's not a guy who's probably going to pop more coming out of the bullpen because he doesn't have big stuff. He's, a guy who's better suited to go long in innings and eat innings throughout a season. So yeah, it's going to have to be a different reliever every inning if they want to get aggressive with it. The one thing we didn't mention is the availability, potentially, or inavailability of Bryan Abreu for the Astros. He is appealing a suspension today. MLB, for some reason, is going to make a decision about whether he will be allowed to pitch in game 7. It's a joke.
They gotta know that by now. They know now. Well, we're recording at 10 o'clock in the morning on the day of the game. They
have to know what their decision is by now. You have to have reviewed the video and determined whether or not you think that he was trying to hit Adolis Garcia in a game that was competitive in a playoff matchup that would have given Texas an advantage. Martin Maldonado's reaction said enough. And by the way, remember when Chase Utley slid into Ruben Tejada's leg and broke it? And then never actually served time for breaking Ruben Tejada's leg for one of the most illegal, gross slides I've ever seen. They appealed his suspension until the next season. So they allowed Chase Utley an entire offseason to appeal his 5-game suspension. And then they dropped the suspension. So we're really going to suspend Bryan Abreu for game 7 here after Chase Utley snapped the guy's leg in half and never touched second base and then was awarded second base upon review. That's the part of the play people forget. Slid 5 feet right of second base, broke Tejada's leg. Tejada obviously never touched second base. And then they went to review and the umpire said, he's safe at second base. Watch the replay. It's great. It's one of the greatest reviews in MLB history that they gave him second base. But yeah, we're really going to suspend Bryan Abreu for game 7 for not hitting a guy intentionally. It's a joke, man. This shouldn't even be something that we're talking about today, but it is, because he's one of their best relievers. And if they take him out of this game, it does hurt Houston's chances pretty significantly. They considered using him for 2 innings last night. He's been one of the most effective relievers in baseball this year. They weren't sure whether to use him for 2 innings because they didn't know if they would have him today. They weren't sure if he should just be eating innings in a game that didn't matter or if he should be saved for a game that might matter. So I think it'd be a travesty if he's suspended tonight. I hope they let him pitch, and I hope they let him appeal whatever it is until next season. But yeah, I think that's a huge key tonight. And Houston does have the bullpen advantage, provided he's available. But as you said, Brendan, the bridge from Scherzer to Chapman to Spores, and those guys have had wonky command into big spots too. It's a sketchy bridge to get there. And then once you get there, those guys tend to start innings and they either look great or they walk 2 guys and then have to figure it out. So yeah, I just think Houston's bullpen is much calmer, much more experienced at getting out of spots like this. But I definitely trust the Astros more to game 7.
All right. Very good. That slide was 2015, right? That feels like not long ago, but it was 8 years ago. Wow. Justin Verlander pitched Friday, 82 pitches. I wonder if they try to use him, but I have a feeling Abreu is going to be available too. But they should have their mind made up as we record Payoff Pitch. And also, not to mention, like, say it was intent, like he didn't even throw at his head. He threw it at his rib area. Like he didn't like go at him.
Yeah.
So
it's just not.
You're right.
We talked about it before the podcast, but my biggest pet peeve in baseball is managers and players getting upset about hit by pitches that are clearly not intentional. And I know the Mets have gotten hit by pitches more than any other team in baseball over the past few years. But I think we all just got sick of watching Buck Showalter out there standing on the top step of the dugout looking like, somebody stole his lunch money. It just like it gets silly at some point. There's situations where you're trying to hit guys, and I don't even know like what annoys me more. Is it that, or is it the robot umpires? Like Brandon Marsh is at bat, in Game 5 against Arizona, taking a pitch inside and outside for strikes that are clearly not. Like I'm tired of watching these human umpires in the playoffs. I don't know about you, BJ, but the number of at bats where I just see like wonky calls or the strike zone changing from one batter to the next. I'm like, what are we doing here? Just automate. Yeah, it's stupid.
It's annoying. I actually went to an Iowa Cubs game where they used the robot umpires in the AAA. I actually kind of enjoyed it, quite frankly. It made the game go so much faster, and I've gone both ways because like, in one hand, like it's one of those unique things about baseball, about just watching blown balls and strikes. Like it's a very annoying thing, but it's like one of the most American things we can do is argue balls and strikes. So we take that away and we give it to the robots. Then what do we argue about again? Right. Then suddenly we think about, wait, I actually enjoyed arguing so much. That actually made me feel good. So I go back and forth sometimes, but that's just the joking side of me. But realistically, no robot umpires as soon as possible.
Yeah, Martín Maldonado took a pitch at the plate. I think it was Game 5. It immediately just snapped and turned to the umpire because it was clear inside strike that was called, and he immediately snapped and turned to the umpire. And it was very obvious, like, you're going to call that for my guy. And then I forgot who was pitching that game, but threw the same exact pitch. It might have been Urquidy, threw the same exact pitch in the same spot, and it didn't get called. And Maldonado is catching that point and turned around, and I think he wanted to choke out the umpire. Like they literally had the same conversation with Maldonado batting about the same pitch, and then he's like, "Okay, you better give me that call." And they looked for the call and didn't. And I don't mind these guys having unique zones. I mind the inconsistency. And when they've been calling a pitch, a ball, or a strike all game, and then they switch the call in a big spot, it literally makes my head fucking explode. So it's the thing that drives me nuts probably about this sport more than any other at this point. Like the inconsistency of the strike zone, I really don't think it should be having this much influence over games. And it really does seem to. I hate when a zone changes based on the count. And
how about Joe Davis and John Smoltz mentioned whoever umped home plate last night, the tallest home plate umpire in Major League Baseball. The guy who umped, I don't know his name. But yeah, there's your bitch about officiating minute. We could do a whole podcast on this for every sport.
I haven't sent out one tweet this year with like a strike zone, the screenshot of the game day strike zone. I've not done any of that this year. I've not complained about umpires. There's been some moments in this postseason that have annoyed me with regards to the umpiring in the strike zones. And I think the officials have had too much of an impact. And I'd really like to see that limited.
Here's a question. I don't know if you mentioned this. Who is umpiring tonight? Do we know?
So I had it. For both games, I looked into the data on both umpires, and it was a relatively neutral factor. Tripp Gibson is doing one of the games. So we have in the ALCS Game 7, Dan Bellino is going to be the home plate ump. I believe he has a slight lean to the under for his career, but nothing substantial. And then Tripp Gibson will be the Game 6 NLCS umpire. I believe he had a slight lean to the over for his career. Again, nothing substantial. Game 7 would be Adam Hamari for the NLCS. I think he's a younger umpire with not fairly sufficient data sample either. So nothing in the data. Yeah, Hamari just 40 years old. Nothing in the data that really suggested any of these guys had a particularly strong lean to pitchers or hitters and favoring the over or the under. But the weather, I think, more influential in Philly tonight, that wind blowing in, temperatures in the low 60s. So yeah, it's not something I'm changing based on the umpire handicap really these final 2 games. There's certain guys who stand out really big in our numbers, but Doug Eddings, who did game 4 of the ALCS, he's a particularly strong under-leaning umpire. But other than that, there haven't been too many guys who popped up. Lance Barksdale for game 5 of the NLCS. There's not, like hockey goalies. There's a few umpires who are very good, and there's a few umpires who are very bad, and everybody else is kind of in the middle. And I think most of these guys who they select for playoff games are in the middle. You rarely get an umpire on paper who looks like they have a strong bias for a playoff game. These guys are getting selected because they're consistent, because they're good. So it's rare. It's like 1 out of each 7-game series you may get like a strong tendency from an umpire.
Okay. Jordan Baker, 6'7". He called balls and strikes last night. Tallest
Better
umpire
view.
in baseball. It's a fun fact from
Like to see him and Bailey Ober get in a fight.
Okay, well, there you go. A lot of bets and a lot of bitching about the officials. What a great podcast. We really are here for the people. We are back here again. So here's the deal. If we get a game 7 for Phillies and Diamondbacks, we will have a show tomorrow. If both of these series wrap up tonight, well, we know one will, but if Phillies take care of business and beat the Diamondbacks, we will be off tomorrow, and more to come as far as when we will have a World Series preview episode out. If these are done by tonight, we're thinking Wednesday. If there is a game 7 tomorrow, probably Thursday. So more to come on that. We'll definitely be here Friday for sure. Game 1 of the World Series is Friday, and that creates a whole thing because the Phillies, if it's Houston, the Phillies would have home field, but if it's the Rangers would have home field. So that opens a whole can of worms. So we got to see what happens tonight. And then, of course, we'll be here tomorrow if there's a game 7 in Philadelphia between the Phillies and the Diamondbacks. For Sean Zerillo and BJ Cunningham, Brendan Glasheen, thanks for listening, everybody. Again, please leave a 5-star rating and review so you can be eligible for an Action Pro free account. We're going to give those out, or give one out again at the end of this week, beginning of next week for this week's podcast. So tune in for that. Thanks for listening to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's MLB betting podcast presented by BetMGM. Good luck. Enjoy the games.